All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping headfirst into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty complex part of biblical prophecy. This idea of a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on Earth, an era that's known as the Millennium. We're going to break down a pretty dense lecture to get right to the heart of what this end-time scenario is all about.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big debate at the center of this whole thing. Then, we'll walk through the prophetic timeline. What happens when? We'll take a look inside the Millennium to see what life is actually like, then see how it all wraps up with final judgments and a whole new creation. And we're going to end with some concepts that, frankly, are going to bend your brain a little.
Okay, first things first. Before we can really get into the details, we have to get our heads around the central conflict here, a debate that has literally shaped Christian thought for centuries. It all boils down to one massive question, right? When the Bible describes this 1,000-year kingdom, is it talking about a literal, physical, future event that's going to happen on this planet? Or is it all just a big metaphor, an allegory for something else, like maybe the era of the church we're living in right now? And this is where you see the two main schools of thought. On one side, you've got amillennialism, which says, hey, this is all symbolic. On the other side, you've got literal premillennialism, which says, nope, this is a real future event. And just so we're all clear, the source material we're digging into today comes down hard on the side of that literal interpretation.
And let's just make sure we're on the same page with the lingo. Amillennialism, the view our source is really pushing back against, it literally means no millennium. The A means no. The whole idea is that these prophecies are already playing out, just, spiritually, in the church age.
Now, where did this allegorical idea even come from? Well, the source traces it all the way back to early church fathers like Augustine. And the argument is that this shift in thinking led to a really controversial doctrine, the idea that the church has replaced Israel in God's plan. And you can see from the quote here, the speaker, well, let's just say they have some very strong feelings about that viewpoint.
Okay, so let's run with that literal interpretation for a minute. If this is all going to happen for real, what's the playbook? What's the sequence of events that actually leads up to this 1,000-year kingdom?
So here's the roadmap to the Millennium, step by step. According to this view, it all starts with an event called the Rapture, where the church is taken off the planet. That kicks off a 7-year clock on what's known as the Tribulation, a period of intense judgment. This all climaxes at the Battle of Armageddon, which is cut short by Christ's second coming to Earth. And the final puzzle piece, Satan gets locked up for 1,000 years, and that is when the millennial clock officially starts ticking.
So, the kingdom has begun. What's it actually like to live in this new world? It's often called a utopia, but there's a pretty big catch.
This is what makes this era so wild to think about. I mean, you have Christ physically ruling the entire planet from Jerusalem. You've got perfect justice, perfect peace, nobody's going hungry, there are no shortages. It sounds absolutely perfect, right? But here's the thing, it's not flawless, because the mortals who are born during this time still have free will. And that's exactly why the source calls this utopian age humanity's final exam.
And get this is probably the most shocking idea in the whole lecture. The source brings up this perspective that the millennium is, in a very strange way, the most evil age of all. Now, how could that possibly be? Well, the logic is because when humanity inevitably rebels at the very end of it, they are doing it under a perfect government with a perfect ruler. This time, there's absolutely no excuse. None.
But this kingdom doesn't last forever. It has a specific 1,000-year term limit. And what happens at the end of that term is, well, it's pretty dramatic. Let's look at how this whole thing wraps up. So this is a super important point. The Bible talks about judgment, but according to this view, it's not just one big event. There are at least 3 separate judgments. You've got the Bema seat, which is for believers in heaven. Think of it as a performance review for rewards. Then, down on earth, there's the sheep and goat judgment for the survivors of the tribulation. And then, after the whole 1,000 years is over, you have the Great White Throne, which is the final judgment for all the unsaved throughout history.
And this is the grand finale. At the end of the 1,000 years, Satan is let out for one last rebellion, which is put down almost instantly. And after that final conflict, the entire physical universe, every star, every galaxy, is literally unmade and replaced with something brand new, what the Bible calls a new heavens and a new earth.
Talk about hitting the cosmic reset button.
And if you thought that was mind-bending, hold on, because this is where the conversation goes from theology straight into theoretical physics, higher dimensions, and things we can't even see.
So during this 1,000-year reign, there's a new temple on earth. And the book of Ezekiel describes it in painstaking architectural detail. But there are some really strange things about it. For one, sacrifices are brought back, but they're not for salvation. They're meant to be a memorial looking back at the cross. And here's another weird detail. It's specified to be open for worship only on Saturdays and on the new moon. Very specific.
Okay, here's another idea that just flips a common concept on its head. The phrase outer darkness. We usually think of that as hell, right? Well, the source argues that's a misunderstanding. Based on the original Greek, it's not a place of torment. It's a place within God's domain, but outside the full-blast presence of His glory, a state of lesser illumination, characterized by profound, crushing disappointment and regret, a deep sense of what could have been.
Now, to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're talking about, after that cosmic reset, a city called the New Jerusalem descends from heaven. The biblical measurement is 12,000 furlongs, which, when you do the math, comes out to a massive structure that is approximately 1,400 miles long, 1,400 miles wide, and 1,400 miles high. Just try to picture that.
So a 1,400-mile cube. How is that even possible? I mean, where does that even fit? To explain this, the source borrows a concept right out of theoretical physics, the tesseract. It's the shadow of a four-dimensional cube projected into our three-dimensional world. The idea is that maybe this heavenly city isn't just big, maybe it exists in more dimensions than we can even perceive.
Which brings us to this final provocative thought. The source suggests that modern physics, theories about hyperspace, or the idea that our universe might be a hologram or a digital simulation, these things don't actually contradict these ancient descriptions. In a weird way, they might just make them feel a bit more plausible. So it leaves us with this huge question. If higher dimensions are real, what does that say about the true nature of our own reality?